Neil's mind raced. The man who'd shaken his hand so firmly, offered him rare scotch, and complimented his craftsmanship at every turn, the very same Roger Fletcher? Bryce's warning sent icy waves of suspicion through Neil's gut. "Are you sure?" Neil whispered, barely able to keep his voice steady. Bryce nodded. He's been at just about every property Vanessa's shown in the last 2 months. I've seen their texts. It's not just business, Neil. That evening, Neil looked at Vanessa differently. Every word, every glance, every gentle touch felt strained by doubt. He noticed how she flinched when her phone vibrated, how her smile no longer reached her eyes. The week crawled by. Neil's heart pounded every time Vanessa's phone lit up, his imagination painting 1,000 terrible pictures. She talked about weekend showings and late-night client calls, while Neil wondered if he was just a supporting character in her newest story. But he could not ignore Bryce's warning. Instead, he began to look for clues, snippets of overheard conversations, traces of cologne that were not his, the steady stream of Roger Fletcher's name appearing in their daily routine. One morning, as Vanessa prepared coffee, Neil gathered his courage. "Why have you been seeing so much of Roger Fletcher lately?" he asked casually, forcing a smile. Vanessa paused, a shadow crossing her face before she answered. "He's one of my company's biggest clients. You know how demanding he can be." The answer sounded reasonable. Almost too reasonable. Neil nodded, but the pit in his stomach did not ease. That night, as rain pattered against their expansive windows, Neil stared at the ceiling, doubts circling like restless birds. The life he had built, the beautiful home, the thriving business, the marriage he invested in suddenly felt as fragile as the glass walls he loved to construct. Cassidy tiptoed into their bedroom just after midnight, her voice small. "Dad, I heard you and Mom arguing. Is everything okay?" Neil's heart squeezed with both guilt and love. He assured her everything would be all right, but he knew that the questions would only multiply. For the first time, he truly saw the cracks in the foundations he had worked so hard to build. "You think I see not handle our kids?" Neil countered, his voice steady and calm. "You think I see not provide for them, love them, and be there for them? You think I see not be a better parent than you?" Vanessa's eyes flashed with anger, but Neil saw the flicker of doubt. He pressed on, his voice low and controlled. "I know about the affair, Vanessa. I know about the lies, the secrets, the plans you've been making with Roger. I know that you've been betraying me, betraying our family for months. And I know that you think you can just walk away from this, from us, and start a new life with him. But I would not let that happen. I would not let you hurt our kids like this. I would not let you destroy our family." Vanessa's face paled, her fingers tightening around her mug. "Neil, you do not understand. I love you. I love the kids. But I love Roger too. I see not choose between you." Neil's heart ached, but his resolve did not waver. "You already chose, Vanessa. You chose him over us, over our family. And now you have to live with that choice. But I would not make this easy for you. I would not let you just walk away from this mess you've created. I want full custody of the kids. I want you to sign over all rights to the lake house. And I want you to disappear from our lives." Vanessa's eyes widened in shock. "You see not do this to me, Neil. You see not just throw me away like this." Neil's expression did not change. "I'm not throwing you away, Vanessa. You did that to yourself. And now you have to face the consequences." Vanessa's face crumpled, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Neil, please. Do not do this. Do not take my kids away from me." Neil's heart twisted, but he stood firm. "I'm not taking them away from you, Vanessa. You were the one who chose to leave. You were the one who chose to betray our family. And now you have to live with that." Vanessa's sobs filled the kitchen, but Neil did not move. He did not comfort her, did not offer her any words of reassurance. He just stood there, his expression calm and resolute as he watched the woman he had loved and trusted for so many years crumble before him. He knew that this was just the beginning, that the road ahead would be long and painful. But he also knew that he had to do this for himself and for his kids. He had to stand up for his family, had to fight for what was right. And he would do it no matter what it took. It does not always have a happy ending, and sometimes the villain is the one who has to stand up for what's right. Cassidy nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I do not want you to be the villain, Dad. I want you to be happy." Neil smiled, his heart swelling with love for his daughter. "I am happy, sweetheart. Because I have you. And because I know that I'm doing the right thing, even if it's not the easy thing." Cassidy leaned into him, her voice soft. "I love you, Dad. I know you redoing what you think is best." Neil kissed the top of her head, his eyes stinging with unshed tears. "I love you too, Cassidy. More than words can express. As they sat there watching the sun set over the city, Neil knew that he had made the right choice. He had chosen to stand up for his family, to fight for what was right even in the face of adversity. And he would continue to do so no matter what challenges lay ahead. The road was long and painful, but he was determined to see it through, for himself and for his children. The battle for custody raged on, with Vanessa pulling out every stop to discredit Neil. She accused him of emotional abuse, of manipulating the children, of being an unfit parent. But Neil stood firm, his resolve unshakable. He had the truth on his side, and he was determined to see justice served. Sylvia Patel, his attorney, was a formidable ally, her sharp mind and unyielding spirit a match for Vanessa's tactics. Together, they fought to expose the lies, to uncover the truth, and to protect the children from the fallout. The courtroom became a battleground, with each side presenting their evidence, their witnesses, their arguments. Neil's parents, Patricia, and even Roger Fletcher took the stand, their testimonies painting a picture of a man driven by jealousy and revenge. But Neil did not waver. He presented his own evidence, his own witnesses, his own arguments. He showed the court the security footage, the text messages, the emails. He showed them the truth. And slowly but surely the tide began to turn. The judge, a stern woman with a reputation for fairness, listened to both sides, her expression inscrutable. She weighed the evidence, considered the testimonies, and made her ruling. Neil was awarded primary custody of the children, with reasonable visitation rights for Vanessa. The lake house was sold, the proceeds divided equally between Neil and Vanessa. And Vanessa was ordered to pay Neil a substantial sum in damages for her infidelity and betrayal. The courtroom erupted in chaos, with Vanessa's sobs filling the air. But Neil stood tall, his expression calm and resolute. He had won, not just the battle, but the war. He had fought for his family, for his children, and for his own dignity. And he had emerged victorious. As he walked out of the courtroom, his children by his side, Neil knew that he had made the right choice. He had chosen to stand up for what was right, to fight for his family, and to protect them from the pain and betrayal that had threatened to destroy them. And in doing so, he had found a strength and a resilience that he never knew he had. The road ahead was uncertain, but Neil was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. He had his children, he had his integrity, and he had his love. And that was enough. I see. Neil's voice was calm, but his eyes held a storm. Patricia, always the peacemaker, tried to soften the blow. Mom just wants what's best for everyone. She thinks it's better if you and Vanessa can co-parent amicably. Neil's gaze sharpened. And what does Vanessa want? Patricia hesitated, then admitted she wants to move on, Neil. She wants to start fresh with Roger. Neil's expression did not change, but his voice was like ice. And what about Thomas? What does he want? Patricia looked away. He's confused, Neil. He's just a kid trying to make sense of all this. Neil stood up, his voice steady and controlled. Tell Mom I'll be there. Patricia's eyes widened in surprise. You will? Neil nodded. I would not miss it for the world. Patricia left, her expression a mix of relief and apprehension. Neil watched her go, his mind racing. He knew what he had to do. He had to stand up for his daughter, for his family, and for the truth. The days leading up to Christmas were a flurry of activity. Neil prepared meticulously, his plan unfolding with the precision of a master builder. He contacted old friends, gathered evidence, and made arrangements that would ensure his message was heard loud and clear. On the day of the Harrington family Christmas celebration, Neil arrived fashionably late, his presence causing a palpable shift in the atmosphere. The house was filled with the usual holiday cheer, but the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Vanessa, dressed in an elegant gown, stood by the fireplace, her arm linked with Roger's. Thomas, looking uncomfortable in a suit, stood nearby, his eyes downcast. Cassidy, dressed in a beautiful dress, her eyes sparkling with excitement, rushed to Neil's side. Dad! She exclaimed, hugging him tightly. I'm so glad you're here. Neil smiled down at her, his heart swelling with love. I would not miss it for the world, sweetheart. Howard and Diane Harrington, dressed in their finest, approached Neil, their expressions a mix of caution and curiosity. Neil, they greeted, their voices polite but guarded. Neil nodded, his expression calm and composed. Mom, Dad, he acknowledged, his voice steady. The room seemed to hold its breath as the family gathered, the air thick with unspoken words and hidden agendas. Neil knew that this was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment when he would stand up for his family, for his daughter, and for the truth. He took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the room, and began to speak. I have something to say, he announced, his voice clear and strong. The room fell silent, all eyes turning to him. Neil's gaze met Vanessa's, then Thomas's, then Cassidy's. And he began to tell his story, his voice steady and unyielding as he laid bare the truth that had been hidden for too long. Photos of Roger in the Harrington home while Neil was away. Emails in which Vanessa outlined moving to California and taking the children. Neil scrolled through everything, the words and images burning into his mind with each flick of his thumb. There was no doubt left, no room for reconciliation, only the clean, cold certainty that he was doing what was necessary to protect his daughter and reclaim some measure of control over his fractured life. Outside, St. Louis Street bustled quietly with the muffled sounds of winter. The world was moving on, but inside Neil's home, the past year replayed with painful clarity. For the first time since the ordeal began, Neil did not feel like a victim. He felt like a father who was finally ready to fight for more than survival, ready to build something new from the ashes. Early the next morning, he and Cassidy packed their bags, laughing over last-minute details. Cassidy, full of questions and eager for a fresh adventure, darted from room to room double-checking every swimsuit and sun hat. As they left their townhouse, the cold air nipping at their faces, Neil looked down at his daughter and saw hope in her eyes. Hope that they could have a Christmas filled with laughter and new memories, far from anyone who did not truly value them. Their flight to Hawaii marked the beginning of a new chapter. On the plane, Cassidy pressed her face to the window, marveling as the city lights of Washington faded beneath the clouds. Neil squeezed her hand, gratitude swelling in his chest. For the first time in months, the tightness around his heart loosened. "Dad," Cassidy said as the captain announced their approach to Honolulu, "this is going to be the best Christmas ever." Neil grinned and ruffled her hair. "That's the plan, sweetheart." In that moment, as they descended toward the bright blue of the Pacific, Neil knew he'd made the right decision. No matter what lay ahead with Vanessa, his parents, or the courts, this Christmas belonged to them. And for the first time in a long time, father and daughter felt truly at peace. He broke the seal and read quickly, heart sinking but not surprised. The psychologist's report echoed the narrative Vanessa had so painstakingly coached Thomas to deliver. Words like volatile, unpredictable, and emotionally distant peppered the evaluation. It painted Neil as a father consumed by work and bitterness, someone Thomas allegedly feared. But Neil could read between the lines, the inconsistencies, the coaching, the contradictions that only someone who knew the truth would recognize. Still, he felt the sting. It hurt to see his son swayed by manipulation and pressure, but most of all, it hurt to know that Thomas's own young heart had been recruited into the war between his parents. Maya waited quietly while Neil gathered himself. "We have what we need to prove everything," she assured him, voice gentle yet unwavering. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Neil looked out the window, watching the gray clouds gather over Lake Sammamish. The future of his family hung in that heavy sky, a storm he could no longer avoid. "Yes," he answered, voice filled with resolve. "For Cassidy, for myself, and even if he does not know it yet, for Thomas." Maya nodded and began outlining the morning's plan in crisp, efficient detail. Neil listened, appreciating her calm professionalism. They would not let this opportunity slip away, too much was at stake. That night, after Cassidy had drifted to sleep, Neil stood for a long while in her doorway, watching the peaceful rise and fall of her breath. Tomorrow would change everything, for better or worse. By the time dawn illuminated a world frosted in fresh snow, Neil felt ready. The finale he had planned with unwavering purpose would soon be set in motion. He knew it would bring pain and perhaps even greater distance from those he once called family. But it would also bring truth, something no amount of deception could obscure forever. He dressed in silence and, as the clock approached 8, turned his cell phone back on. The first alert flashed, package delivered. The second, file sent. And in his parents' stately home, as a chorus of holiday voices drifted around the tree, the foundation of false harmony began, at last, to crack. The video began with a grainy night vision feed of the Harrington family home. The timestamp read 2:17 a.m. The camera panned slowly, capturing the dimly lit living room, the staircase, and finally the hallway leading to the bedrooms. Neil's voice narrated softly, "This is the night Vanessa chose to end our marriage. The night she decided to betray not just me, but our family." The feed cut to a different angle, showing Vanessa tiptoeing down the hallway, her phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was low, but the microphone picked up every word. "I not wait to see you tomorrow. I miss you so much." It's torture being here with him, pretending everything is normal. Neil's heart ached as he listened to her words, but his resolve did not waver. He knew he had to expose the truth, no matter how painful. The video continued, showing Vanessa slipping out of the house, her coat wrapped tightly around her. The camera followed her as she got into a car waiting at the end of the driveway. The license plate was clearly visible, and Neil's voice narrated, "Roger Fletcher." The man who would become her lover, her partner in deceit. The feed cut to a different location, a hotel room. Vanessa and Roger were entwined on the bed, their whispers of affection and plans for the future captured in stark detail. Neil's voice was steady. This is the beginning of the end. The moment she chose him over us. The video then shifted to a series of text messages, emails, and surveillance photos, each one a piece of the puzzle that painted a clear picture of Vanessa's betrayal. Neil's voice narrated each piece of evidence, his tone calm and controlled, but the underlying anger was palpable. Finally, the video ended with a montage of happier times, family vacations, birthday celebrations, and quiet moments at home. Neil's voice softened. This is what we had. This is what she threw away. And this is what I am fighting to protect. Neil saved the video, his heart heavy but his mind clear. He had done what he had to do. He had gathered the evidence, prepared his case, and now he was ready to face the storm that was about to break. As he sat in the quiet of his study, the house empty and still, Neil felt a sense of peace. He had made his choices and he would stand by them no matter what the consequences. Tomorrow would be a new day, a day of truth and reckoning. And he was ready to face it head on. This is war, Bryce. And in war, there are casualties. Bryce sighed, running a hand through his hair. I know. I just hope you know what you're redoing. Neil's expression was calm, resolute. I do. He stood, leaving money on the table to cover their coffees. Thanks for your help, Bryce. I appreciate it. Bryce nodded, his expression troubled. Just be careful, Neil. You replaying with fire. Neil left the cafe, stepping out into the cold winter air. He took a deep breath, the crispness of the snow filling his lungs. He was ready. The final pieces were in place. Tomorrow, he would deliver his message and there would be no turning back. As he walked back to his car, he pulled out his phone and dialed Sylvia Patel. It's time, he said when she answered. The emergency motion is filed, she confirmed. Judge Watkins will review it on the 26th. Are you ready for the fallout? Neil thought of Cassidy, of Thomas, of the life he was fighting to protect. I am. He replied, his voice steady and sure. Then let's hope justice prevails. Sylvia said, her voice filled with determination. That night, Neil sat in his study, the house quiet around him. He opened his laptop, the screen glowing in the dim light. He had one last thing to do before he could rest. He began to type, his fingers moving swiftly over the keys. To my family, he wrote, Christmas has always been about truth. The birth of Christ brought a difficult truth into a world that was not ready to hear it. This Christmas, I'm following that example. He paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. I have evidence that Vanessa and Roger Fletcher have been planning to take my children to California without my knowledge or consent. I have proof of their affair, of the lies they told and the manipulations they used to turn my son against me. I have records of the money Roger has been transferring to Vanessa, funds that will be used to start their new life together. He attached the video compilation, the bank records, the text messages, and the emails. He hit send, the message disappearing into the ether on its way to his parents, his sister, and Vanessa. He leaned back in his chair, his heart pounding in his chest. It was done. The truth was out and there was no going back. Tomorrow would be a day of reckoning, a day when the foundations of his family would be tested and the structural integrity of their bonds would be revealed. And he was ready to face whatever came next. He pulled back, looking into his daughter's eyes. We'll have a great time in Hawaii, he promised. Just you and me. Cassidy smiled, her eyes shining with excitement. I see not wait, she exclaimed, hugging him again. Neil ruffled her hair, his heart swelling with love. Me neither, sweetheart. Me neither. As Cassidy finished packing, Neil double-checked the arrangements for their trip. Everything was in order, flights, accommodations, even a surprise or two to make the holiday special. He wanted this trip to be a beacon of joy and normalcy amidst the storm that was about to break. Once Cassidy was settled in bed, Neil returned to his study, the weight of his decisions pressing down on him. He opened his laptop, reviewing the evidence one last time. The truth was laid out in stark detail, each piece a testament to the betrayals he had endured. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. Tomorrow would be a day of reckoning, a day when the truth would be revealed and the consequences would be felt by everyone involved. But he was ready. He had to be. For Cassidy, for Thomas, and for himself. He closed his laptop, the room falling silent. The house was quiet, the world outside still and peaceful. But inside Neil, a storm was brewing. A storm of truth, justice, and the unyielding determination to protect what mattered most. As he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, he thought of the choices that had led him to this point. The betrayals, the manipulations, the lies. And he thought of the choices he was making now, the ones that would shape the future of his family. He thought of Cassidy, her eyes shining with excitement and trust. He thought of Thomas, his son, who was being pulled into a web of deceit. And he thought of Vanessa, his soon-to-be ex-wife, who had chosen to destroy their family for her own gain. And he knew with a certainty that burned like a flame that he was doing the right thing. He was fighting for the truth, for justice, and for the love of his family. And he would not back down, no matter what the cost. With that resolve burning in his heart, Neil closed his eyes, ready to face whatever came next. Tomorrow would be a day of reckoning, and he would be ready. He changed into swim trunks and a t-shirt, grabbing a beach towel and sunscreen as he headed out to meet his daughter. The sand was warm beneath his feet, the sun a gentle heat on his skin. Cassidy was already in the water, laughing and splashing as she waded in up to her knees. Neil joined her, the cool ocean water a stark contrast to the warmth of the sun. They spent the afternoon playing in the surf, building sandcastles, and collecting seashells. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, they sat on the beach watching the waves roll in. Cassidy leaned against him, her voice soft. "This is the best Christmas ever, Dad." Neil wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "I'm glad, sweetheart. You deserve it." They returned to the house, their skin salty and their hair damp. Neil grilled steaks on the outdoor barbecue while Cassidy set the table on the lanai, the sound of the ocean providing a soothing backdrop to their conversation. As they ate, Cassidy chattered excitedly about the beach, the pool, and all the things she wanted to do during their stay. Neil listened, his heart swelling with love and gratitude. This was what mattered, he thought. These moments with his daughter, free from the shadows of betrayal and manipulation. This was what he was fighting for. After dinner, they exchanged gifts, laughing at the silly presents they had chosen for each other. Cassidy's eyes widened with delight as she unwrapped a new snorkel set, her face lighting up with excitement. Neil smiled, watching her joy. This was what Christmas was about, he thought. Love, laughter, and the simple pleasure of being together. As Cassidy drifted off to sleep, her face peaceful in the soft glow of her bedside lamp, Neil sat on the lanai, the sound of the ocean filling the night air. He thought of the day ahead, of the storm that was about to break. But for now he pushed those thoughts aside, focusing instead on the beauty of the moment. Tomorrow would come soon enough. For now he would savor the peace, the love, and the knowledge that he had done everything in his power to protect what mattered most. With a deep breath he stood, his resolve unshakable. Tomorrow he would face the consequences of his actions. Tomorrow he would fight for the truth. But tonight he would rest, knowing that he had given his daughter a Christmas to remember. And that in the end was all that truly mattered. "I wish you peace, but I cannot give you forgiveness," Neil stated, his voice even but resolute. "To Roger," he continued, "you entered my life under the pretense of friendship and professional admiration, all while orchestrating the dismantling of my family. Your duplicity is now clear to everyone involved. I trust you and Vanessa will be happy together, somewhere far from my children." To my parents, Neil spoke with the tired dignity of a son who had finally outgrown seeking their acceptance. You chose comfort over truth, reputation over relationship. The evidence now makes your choices visible to everyone, including yourselves. I hope you reflect on the cost of your decisions. To Patricia, thank you for your honesty when it finally came. Your loyalty to our parents has cost you a brother and a niece. I wish you self-respect and peace and nothing more. And finally, to Thomas, Neil's voice softened, full of love and regret. I love you, son, no matter what. When you're ready for the truth, it will be here. I'll always fight for you, even if you choose not to see it now. Neil closed with a single, unwavering statement. The truth is not always comfortable, but it's all we have. I choose to stand in the light, even if it means standing alone. He rendered and double-checked the upload. At precisely 8:15 a.m. Seattle time, the encrypted message would deliver itself into the inboxes of everyone who needed to see it. His parents, Patricia, Vanessa, Roger, the family's attorneys, the court-appointed psychologist, and ultimately Thomas himself. The Christmas morning that dawned on Hawaii brought with it peace, sunlight, and clarity. For the first time in years, Neil awoke without a knot of anxiety in his chest. He watched Cassidy sleep for a moment, the charm bracelet glinting on her wrist, and whispered a quiet prayer for her happiness and for his family's healing, however long it might take. Down the hallway, a phone somewhere in Seattle buzzed. And with that, the long-awaited reckoning began. Neil took a deep breath, his heart aching. He knew that Thomas was not the author of those messages, not truly. His son was a pawn, a victim of the same manipulations that had nearly destroyed Neil himself. He typed a quick response, his fingers steady despite the turmoil in his chest. I'm in Hawaii with Cassidy. We were having a great time. I'll be back soon and we can talk then. Until then, Merry Christmas, son. He hit send, then turned off his phone, silencing the storm that was about to break. As he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, he thought of the choices that had led him to this point. The betrayals, the manipulations, the lies. And he thought of the choices he was making now, the ones that would shape the future of his family. He thought of Cassidy, her eyes shining with excitement and trust. He thought of Thomas, his son, who was being pulled into a web of deceit. And he thought of Vanessa, his soon-to-be ex-wife, who had chosen to destroy their family for her own gain. And he knew with a certainty that burned like a flame that he was doing the right thing. He was fighting for the truth, for justice, and for the love of his family. And he would not back down, no matter what the cost. With that resolve burning in his heart, Neil closed his eyes, ready to face whatever came next. Tomorrow would be a day of reckoning, and he would be ready. As he drifted off to sleep, the sound of the ocean lulled him into a restless dream, a mix of memories and fears, hopes and regrets. But beneath it all, there was a steady, unshakable conviction. He had done what he had to do. He had fought for his family, for his daughter, and for the truth. And in the end, that was all that mattered. When Neil woke the next morning, the sun was already high in the sky, casting a warm glow over the ocean. He checked his phone, seeing a flurry of missed calls and messages, all from his family. He ignored them, focusing instead on the present moment. Today was Christmas, and he would spend it with his daughter, creating memories that would outlast the storm that was brewing back in Seattle. He found Cassidy already up, her face pressed against the glass door leading to the lanai, watching the waves crash against the shore. She turned as he entered, her eyes bright with excitement. "Merry Christmas, Dad," she exclaimed, throwing her arms around him. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart," he replied, hugging her tightly. "Today is our day. Just you and me." Cassidy beamed, her smile lighting up the room. "I see not wait," she exclaimed, pulling him towards the door. "Let us go to the beach?" Neil laughed, his heart swelling with love and gratitude. "Let us do it." As they spent the day exploring the beach, building sandcastles, and collecting seashells, Neil pushed all thoughts of his family and the impending storm from his mind. Today was about Cassidy, about creating a Christmas that she would remember with joy and happiness. And as he watched her laugh and play in the sun, he knew that he had made the right choice. He had fought for the truth, for justice, and for the love of his family. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Neil's voice hardened. "Thomas will have to make his own choices, just as I have. And just as you all did when you chose to believe Vanessa's lies over my truth." There was a long, heavy silence before Diane spoke again, her voice trembling. "You were making a terrible mistake, Neil. You were destroying our family. Our family was destroyed the moment you chose to believe Vanessa's lies over my truth," Neil replied. "The moment you chose to exclude Cassidy from your lives. The moment you manipulated Thomas into turning against me. I'm simply exposing the truth that you all worked so hard to hide." Another silence, then Diane's voice, small and defeated. "I hope you know what you're doing, Neil. I hope you can live with the consequences." "So do I, Mom. So do I." Neil ended the call, his heart aching but his resolve unshakable. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the next call. It came almost immediately from his father. "Neil, this is unacceptable." Howard's voice was cold, his anger barely contained. "You've gone too far this time. The evidence speaks for itself, Dad." Neil replied calmly. "The truth is out and there's nothing you can do to stop it. There will be consequences, Neil. You see, not just throw accusations around like this. The evidence is clear, Dad. The text messages, the emails, the financial records, the surveillance footage. It all tells a story of betrayal and manipulation. And now that story is out for everyone to see." There was a long pause before Howard spoke again, his voice low and dangerous. "You're playing with fire, Neil. You have no idea what you've started." "I know exactly what I've started, Dad. I've started the truth. And sometimes the truth burns." Neil ended the call, his heart pounding in his chest. He took a deep breath, then dialed Sylvia Patel. "It's done," he said when she answered. "The evidence has been delivered. The investigations will proceed. Are you prepared for the fallout?" Sylvia asked, her voice steady and calm. "I am," Neil replied, his voice just as steady. "Then let us hope justice prevails," Sylvia said, her voice filled with determination. "That's all we can do." As Neil ended the call, he heard Cassidy's laughter from the pool, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. He took a deep breath, pushing aside the storm of emotions that threatened to overwhelm him. Today was about Cassidy, about creating a Christmas that she would remember with happiness and love. And he would not let anything, not even the implosion of his family, take that away from her. He joined her in the pool, her laughter infectious as they splashed and played in the warm water. For the rest of the day, Neil focused solely on his daughter, pushing aside thoughts of the storm that was brewing back in Seattle. He knew that the truth had been revealed, that the consequences would be far-reaching and painful. But he also knew that he had done what he had to do, that he had fought for the truth, for justice, and for the love of his family. And in the end, that was all that mattered. As the sun set on their Christmas in paradise, Neil held Cassidy close, her head resting on his shoulder as they watched the sky turn from orange to pink to purple. He knew that tomorrow would bring challenges, that the road ahead would be long and difficult. But he also knew that he had the strength to face whatever came next, that he had the love of his daughter, and that, in the end, that was enough. The truth was out, the evidence delivered, the consequences set in motion. Now came the rebuilding, the long, slow process of healing and forgiveness, if it was even possible. Neil took a sip of his whiskey, the burn in his throat a stark contrast to the warm breeze that rustled the palm trees. He thought of Thomas, of the pain and anger in his son's voice. He thought of Vanessa, of the lies and manipulations that had driven them to this point. He thought of his parents, of the choices they had made and the consequences they would now face. And he thought of Cassidy, of her unwavering loyalty and love, of the future they would build together, honest and strong. Neil's phone buzzed with a new message, this one from Sylvia Patel. The emergency motion has been granted. Judge Watkins has ordered a temporary suspension of all custody proceedings pending a full investigation. Vanessa and Roger's travel plans have been put on hold. Neil felt a sense of relief, a small victory in the midst of the storm. He replied with a simple thank you, then set his phone aside, his mind already turning to the next steps. He would need to find a new place to live, a new normal for him and Cassidy. He would need to navigate the legal and financial fallout, the public scrutiny, the judgment of those who had once called him friend and family. But he was ready. He had fought for the truth, for justice, and for the love of his family. And he would continue to fight, no matter what challenges lay ahead. As he finished his whiskey, the night sky above him a canopy of stars, Neil felt a sense of peace. He had done what he had to do. He had exposed the truth, had fought for what was right, and had protected what mattered most. And in the end, that was all that mattered. With a deep breath he stood, his resolve unshakable. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to fight. But he was ready. He was Neil Harrington, and he would not be defeated. He would not be destroyed. He would rise from the ashes, stronger and more determined than ever. And he would build a new future, a future of truth, of love, and of hope. As he turned to go inside, he paused, looking out at the ocean one last time. The waves crashed against the shore, a steady, unyielding rhythm, a testament to the power of nature, of truth, of love. And Neil Harrington, standing on the precipice of a new future, was ready to face whatever came next. With a deep breath, he stepped inside, closing the door on the past and opening it to the future. A future of truth, of love, and of hope. A future that he would build one brick at a time with his daughter by his side. And with that he was ready to face the dawn. He pushed it down, focusing on Cassidy. You were right not to keep that secret, sweetheart. Sometimes secrets can hurt people. Cassidy nodded, her expression serious. Like how Mom and Grandma and everyone tried to make you look bad. Exactly. Neil agreed, his voice steady. And now we have to deal with the consequences of those secrets being revealed. Cassidy looked out at the ocean, her voice small. Will I have to talk to people about Mom and me? Maybe. But you do not have to say anything you do not want to. The most important thing is to tell the truth, just like you always do. Cassidy turned back to him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I do not want to hurt anyone, Dad. I just want things to be normal again. Neil pulled her into a hug, his heart aching for her innocence. I know, sweetheart. But sometimes normal is not always the best thing. Sometimes we have to go through hard things to find something better on the other side. Cassidy sniffled, wiping her nose on her sleeve. Like how we had to tear down the bad wall to build a new one. Just like that. Neil replied, his voice filled with love and pride. You re so wise, Cassidy. So strong. Cassidy smiled, her tears drying in the warm sun. I learned from the best. Neil laughed, his heart swelling with love. That's my girl. As they finished their sandcastle, the sun began to set, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink. Neil knew that their time in Hawaii was coming to an end, that the real work of rebuilding would begin soon. But he also knew that he had the strength to face whatever came next, that he had the love of his daughter, and that, in the end, that was all that mattered. The next morning, they packed their bags, their hearts heavy with the knowledge of what awaited them back in Seattle. But they also carried with them the memories of their time in Hawaii, of the love and laughter they had shared, of the truth they had spoken. And with that, they were ready to face the future, whatever it might hold. As they boarded their flight, Neil looked out at the ocean one last time, a symbol of the vast, uncharted waters that lay ahead. But he was ready. He was Neil Harrington, and he would not be defeated. He would not be destroyed. He would rise from the ashes, stronger and more determined than ever. And he would build a new future, a future of truth, of love, and of hope. A future that he would build one brick at a time with his daughter by his side. And with that, he turned to Cassidy, his heart filled with love and determination. "Ready, sweetheart?" Cassidy smiled, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Ready, Dad." As they took their seats, Neil knew that the journey ahead would be long and difficult. But he also knew that he had the strength to face whatever came next, that he had the love of his daughter, and that, in the end, that was all that mattered. And with that, they took off, soaring into the future, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Neil gave a curt nod, stepping inside. The familiar scent of pine and cinnamon wafted from the foyer, though the atmosphere was thick with tension rather than warmth. He followed Howard in silence down the hallway, past the family portraits that now felt like relics from a past life. Patricia met them at the foot of the staircase. "Thomas is in the library," she said quietly. "We'll give you privacy. The counselor is already here." Neil hesitated at the door before stepping into the library. Thomas sat in an armchair by the window, hunched over, staring at his hands. The family counselor, a kind-looking woman with gentle eyes, offered Neil a reassuring nod, and then quietly excused herself to the adjoining room, giving father and son the space they needed. For a moment, Neil simply stood there, unsure if words or silence would be more powerful. Finally, he spoke, his voice soft but steady. "Hi, Thomas." Thomas did not look up, but his jaw tensed. "Why do you do it, Dad?" he muttered, voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you have to show everyone everything? You ruined everything." Neil sank into the chair across from him, keeping his tone calm. "I know it feels that way, son. I did not want to hurt you. I wanted to protect you, even if it meant making hard choices. You made Mom cry. Grandma's not sleep, and everyone hates you now." Thomas burst out, his eyes filling with tears. Neil reached out, though he kept his distance, giving Thomas time. "I know this hurts. I wish there was another way. For a long time, I let others paint me as the villain. I thought things might heal if I stayed silent. But the truth matters, Thomas, even when it hurts." Thomas finally looked up, anger and pain etched on his young face. "You could just trusted me, not forced me to choose sides." Neil nodded slowly. "You rewrite. No child should have to choose between their parents. That was never what I wanted. I am sorry for my mistakes." The two sat in uneasy silence, the weight of so many unspoken words closing the distance between them. Finally, Neil whispered, "I love you. That's the only thing I need you to remember right now. When you're ready to talk, or just to sit together, I'll be here. I always will be." Thomas looked away, but this time, he did not recoil from his father. For the first time in months, a fragile thread of hope shimmered between them, thin but real. A start. Thomas nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I guess I understand that." Neil smiled softly. "I hope so, son. I really do." Another silence fell between them, but this time, it felt less heavy, less fraught. Thomas looked around the room, his gaze landing on a family photo from happier times. "Do you think we can ever go back to how things were?" Neil followed his gaze, his heart aching at the memory. "No, Thomas, I do not think we can. But I think we can build something new, something better. Something based on truth and honesty." Thomas was quiet for a long moment before he spoke again. "I want to try." Neil's heart swelled with love and pride. "I want to try too, son. I want to try too." They talked for a while longer, their conversation tentative but hopeful. Neil answered Thomas's questions honestly, acknowledging his pain and confusion, and offering reassurance and support. As their time together drew to a close, Neil stood, extending a hand to his son. "Can we start over, Thomas? Can we try to rebuild our relationship one truth at a time?" Thomas looked at Neil's hand, then up at his face. A small, tentative smile played at the corners of his mouth. Yeah, Dad. D like that. Neil smiled back, his heart filled with a warmth he had not felt in months. Me too, son. Me too. As they shook hands, sealing their pact, Neil knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult. But he also knew that he had taken the first step, that he had reached out to his son in honesty and love, and that, in the end, that was all that mattered. As he left the den, Neil found Howard and Patricia waiting for him in the hallway. They looked at him with a mix of hope and trepidation. How did it go? Patricia asked softly. It was a start. Neil replied, his voice steady and sure. We have a long way to go, but I think we can rebuild our relationship one truth at a time. Howard nodded, his expression grave. We're glad to hear that, Neil. We truly are. Patricia reached out, squeezing Neil's arm. Thank you for coming, Neil. For giving Thomas a chance. Neil looked at his sister, then at his father. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for Thomas. And for Cassidy. And for myself. Because it's the right thing to do. Howard and Patricia exchanged a glance, then nodded. We understand, Neil. We do. Neil turned to leave, then paused, looking back at his family. I hope you do, because the truth is the only thing that can heal us now. And with that, he walked away, leaving the past behind and stepping into the future, one truth at a time. Neil nodded, his voice steady. She's planning to. She's been attending all your games and concerts. Has not she? Thomas shrugged. Yeah, I guess. It's weird, though. Seeing her and not really knowing what to say. Neil put a hand on his son's shoulder. It's okay to take things slow. You do not have to rush into forgiveness or forget what happened. Just take it one step at a time. Thomas nodded, his expression thoughtful. I know. It's just hard sometimes. Neil smiled softly. I know it is, son. But you're handling it better than most adults would. Thomas looked up at him, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Thanks, Dad. They exited the Space Needle, the bustling streets of Seattle enveloping them in a familiar hum of activity. As they walked to the ice cream parlor, Neil could not help but reflect on how far they'd come. The road had been long and painful, filled with more twists and turns than he could have imagined. But they had made it together. And in the process, they had forged a new kind of family, one built on truth, honesty, and a deep, unshakable love. As they sat in the ice cream parlor, the sun dipping below the horizon, Neil looked at his children. Their faces lit up with laughter and joy, and he knew with a certainty that filled his heart that they would be okay, that they would not just survive but thrive, that they would build something new, something better, from the ashes of the past. And that, in the end, was all that mattered. As they finished their ice cream and made their way to the movie theater, Neil felt a sense of peace. A peace that came from knowing that he had done what he had to do, that he had fought for the truth, for justice, and for the love of his family. And that, in the end, that was enough. As they settled into their seats, the lights dimming and the previews beginning, Neil took his children's hands, one in each of his own. And he knew, with a certainty that filled his heart, that they would face whatever came next, together. And that, in the end, that was all that mattered. Thomas is doing well, Neil typed, attaching a photo of the three of them at the Space Needle. He.s. looking forward to graduation. He.s. also looking forward to seeing you there. Vanessa replied almost immediately, her message brief and to the point. Thank you for letting me know. I'll be there. Neil hesitated before typing his next message. The children have been asking about you. They miss you. There was a long pause before Vanessa responded. I miss them too. More than you know. Neil considered her words, then typed his reply. Then show them. Be there for them, not just at graduations and games, but in the everyday moments. Be present, be honest, and be patient. Vanessa's response was slow in coming. I'm trying, Neil. I really am. Neil sighed, setting his phone down. He knew that Vanessa's journey toward redemption would be long and difficult, filled with setbacks and challenges. But he also knew that she was trying, that she was making an effort to be a better mother, a better person. And that, in the end, was all he could ask for. As he turned back to his work, Neil felt a sense of peace. A peace that came from knowing that he had done what he had to do, that he had fought for the truth, for justice, and for the love of his family. And that, in the end, that was enough. As he worked late into the night, the house quiet around him, Neil thought of the future, of the challenges and triumphs that lay ahead. But he also thought of the present, of the love and laughter that filled his home, of the truth that had set them free. And he knew, with a certainty that filled his heart, that they would face whatever came next, together. And that, in the end, that was all that mattered. As he finally turned off his light and made his way to bed, Neil felt a sense of contentment. A contentment that came from knowing that he had done what he had to do, that he had fought for the truth, for justice, and for the love of his family. And that, in the end, that was enough. As he drifted off to sleep, the sound of his children's soft breathing filling the night, Neil knew that he had found his way back to the truth. And that, in the end, that was all that mattered. And that worth fighting for, worth the pain and the struggle. Thomas nodded, his expression thoughtful. I think I understand that now. More than I did before. Neil smiled, his heart swelling with pride and love. I'm glad, son. I really am. Thomas hesitated, then asked, do you think Mom will ever be part of that something different? Neil considered the question carefully. I do not know, Thomas. That's up to her. She has to prove, through her actions, not just her words, that she is committed to change. That she is willing to accept the consequences of her past actions and work to build a better future. Thomas nodded slowly. I guess that makes sense. Neil ruffled his son's hair. It's late. You should try to get some sleep. Thomas smiled, his eyes reflecting a newfound wisdom beyond his years. Yeah, you're right. Good night, Dad. Good night, Thomas. Neil watched as his son retreated down the hallway, his heart filled with a sense of peace and contentment. As he turned back to his work, he knew that the road ahead would be long and challenging. But he also knew that he had the strength to face whatever came next, that he had the love of his family, and that, in the end, that was all that mattered. As he worked late into the night, the house quiet around him, Neil thought of the future, of the challenges and triumphs that lay ahead. But he also thought of the present, of the love and laughter that filled his home, of the truth that had set them free. And he knew, with a certainty that filled his heart, that they would face whatever came next, together. And that, in the end, that was all that mattered. As he finally turned off his light and made his way to bed, Neil felt a sense of contentment. A contentment that came from knowing that he had done what he had to do, that he had fought for the truth, for justice, and for the love of his family. And that, in the end, that was enough. As he drifted off to sleep, the sound of his children's soft breathing filling the night, Neil knew that he had found his way back to the truth. And that, in the end, that was all that mattered. And honest structures, even when they re smaller or simpler than what came before, are always stronger in the long run. Thomas nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. Night, Dad. Good night, son. As Thomas disappeared back toward his bedroom, Neil returned to his desk and closed the architectural plans for new foundations. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: Vanessa's brief visit, Howard and Diane's weekly call requesting expanded grandparent time, Patricia's tentative invitation for coffee to discuss family healing. Neil would navigate each interaction with the clarity that had emerged from the Christmas demolition. He would protect what mattered: his children, his integrity, his hard-won peace. He would maintain boundaries with those who had proven themselves untrustworthy. He would continue building his new life with the precision and patience that had always characterized his best work. And he would remember always that some structures must fall completely before something stronger can rise in their place. Neil turned out the light, the quiet of his home echoing with gratitude and hope. He was ready to face whatever came next, confident in the foundations he had laid, foundations of truth, love, and resilience.